Be agreed to. I call the member for Clark.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I support this motion and I applaud the ALP for moving it. But I do at the same time condemn the confecting expressions of concern for asylum seekers that I hear so often in this place from both the LNP parties and the Labor Party. Now, I acknowledge there are good people in both parties and there are good people in this chamber right now who personally have very strong views in support of asylum seekers. And I also acknowledge that the ALP is to be applauded for supporting the Medivac legislation, which regrettably was overturned with the change of government. But I'm going to say a few home truths here, Deputy Speaker, because we do need to clear up the record, and that is that both the LNP parties and the Labor Party support mandatory detention. Both the LNP parties and the Labor Party support offshore processing. Both the LNP parties and the Labor Party support towbacks. Both the LNP parties and the Labor Party several weeks ago voted in support and spoke in support of the Migration Amendment clarifying international obligations for removal Bill 2021. I was the only MP, in fact, in the House of Representatives to speak against that bill, and there was no opportunity for a division. That bill legalises under Australian law the indefinite detention of non-citizens in Australia if their visa has been cancelled or expired and they can't be returned to their country of origin. So, in fact, the Labor Party supports, in some circumstances, indefinite detention. Deputy Speaker, these are all facts, and I think it's important that we understand that this is the case, because I'm reaching out to both sides of the chamber, to the Liberal Party, the National Party and the Labor Party, and I'm saying to all three parties, you've got to lift your game and you've got to adopt a more humane and lawful in international law response to asylum seekers. And I note that both the LNP parties and the Labor Party, none of those parties in fact supported my Ending Indefinite and Arbitrary Immigration Detention Bill 2021. That bill provided that alternatives to immigration detention, which may take various forms depending on the particular circumstances of the individual, are to be almost always used in preference to immigration detention. Under that bill, which received no support from either major party, immigration detention for non-citizens and refugees must be lawful, necessary, proportionate and for the shortest time possible. The provisions of that bill made mandatory detention illegal. The bill also clearly outlined the reasons and the timeframes, communication and services that are to be available in immigration detention and which would be independently monitored. So there's a case, Deputy Speaker, where the House was given the opportunity, the government and the opposition were given the opportunity to support a bill that would have ended indefinite and arbitrary immigration detention, and it received no support from either major party. So too my Refugee Protection Bill in 2019 received no support from either major party. That bill provided for a sustainable, equitable and humane response to the protection and processing of asylum seekers and refugees in the Asia-Pacific region. A key component of that bill was the Asia-Pacific Asylum Seeker Solution, APAS, which was to be a regional framework to be initiated by the Australian government in partnership with other Asia-Pacific countries and overseen by the UNHCR, an alternative to our current regime of mandatory detention, towbacks, offshore processing and preparedness to detain indefinitely non-citizens who can't be returned to their country of origin. So, Deputy Speaker, can I say I support the motion because, of course, we need to get the remaining people off Nauru and out of Manus Island in PNG. Of course we have to get the many people who are in immigration detention in Australia out of detention. The motion is sound. But we've got to stop this confected expressions of concern when at the end of the day Australia's bipartisan policy, its response to asylum seekers, remains fundamentally immoral and illegal under international law. This country must adopt an alternative response to asylum seekers, one that is moral, one that is legal under international law, and one that we can be proud about on the international stage, because for now, we remain a pariah when it comes to our response to asylum seekers. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.